if we can help people to sleep better, we are going to improve human health globally. We're not going to rub out all disease, but better sleep is going to allow everybody to be healthier and happier and to live longer and healthier lives. So I think it's a really important area.
I'm Jules Walters, a health coach for curious leaders, helping you to become the CEO of your health. Yes, you got it, the Chief Executive Officer, the one who's in charge, the one who owns it. I've spent decades in healthcare as an entrepreneur and a CEO. And what I've learned is that many of the answers to a long and a healthy life are up to us. I'm a big believer in the power of us to adapt. Let's face it, we've done it before. This podcast, The Health Refresh, is all about helping you to understand what you can do to improve your health, nano step by nano step. Well, today we're going to talk to a leading expert on the genetics of sleep. We spend about a third of our lives asleep. And for some of us, getting to sleep and staying asleep is more of a challenge than for others. And some of that is down to our genes. So I'm delighted to welcome to the show Dr. Louis Ptacek, who leads a Division of Neurogenetics in the Department of Neurology at the University of California, San Francisco. And great to have you join us today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So maybe we could start off with a little bit about your background and how you became interested in the genetics of sleep.
I'm a neurologist by training and have been for many years studying genetics of hereditary neurological diseases. And along the way, one of my colleagues, when I was at the University of Utah, came to me with an interesting woman who he thought had a genetic form of being a morning lark. We've always known that there are morning larks and night owls, but most people fall in a normal distribution between those. And so we set out to study that family and then many more. And because it was inherited in the family, this trait, we realized that this was an opportunity to study normal humans with an extreme circadian phenotype to identify human circadian genes and mutations. And then later, my colleague Yingwei Fu came upon families that are natural short sleepers. We know that there are natural short sleepers, natural long sleepers, with most of us falling somewhere in between. And again, by studying families that segregate a trait like that, it's possible to identify genes and mutations that cause people to require less sleep or to require more sleep. So we've just happened into this field. It's so interesting, and we're very excited about working in this space because so little is understood about sleep and what it is and what it's for.
Right. And what have you found so far in the research that you've done in terms of either groups of people and how their genes affect their sleep? What do we know so far?
We've identified many genes and mutations that cause human families to have this trait of waking up really, really early in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and having to go to sleep because they're so tired around dinner time. And we've done studies of the proteins that these genes encode, both the normal proteins and the variant proteins encoded by the mutated genes. And we're learning about regulation of the human circadian clock in a very detailed sort of way. And our work in some of these families has also led us into studying the relationship between circadian regulation and affective behavior, or mood. There are mutations in a gene that we've identified that cause these individuals to be morning larks, but also to be more susceptible to seasonal affective disorder. We have some very direct ties between the circadian clock and its regulation and diabetes and blood sugar control. So that's all on the circadian side. And then with regard to the sleep genes, we've found a number of genes that, when mutated, can cause people to sleep less. And we have the strong impression that they're very healthy despite sleeping less than the average person requires. For all people, I think, if we're chronically sleep deprived, that's bad for our health. But it is not correct to say that everybody needs 8 or 8.5 hours of sleep. Or there's some of us who only require 4 or 5 hours of sleep to feel good, to work in a productive way. And others that really require 9 or 10 hours of sleep in order to feel good and work at an optimal level.
I was just checking the guidelines from I think it's the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, recommends at least 7 hours a night sleep. But in your research, have you found that's not the case for everyone?
Oh, it's absolutely not the case for everyone. That is as simplistic a way of approaching sleep as saying that I think all men and women should be 5'10", and if you're not, that's bad. It's just not how human behavior, sleep behavior, it's not how human traits of any sort, blood pressure, skin color, eye color, etc. It's just not how it works. There's a huge amount of variation in the genetics, in the genomes of you and me, for example. Just the two of us. There are millions of differences between our genes and our DNA that make for differences like you being a woman and me being a man, but you being this height and me being that height. I have a little bit of high blood pressure and maybe you don't. So everything is genetic. But the genes that we have when we're born or when we're conceived even are operating in us on the background of our environment. And so everything is really genetic, but everything is also environmental. And so how my sleep manifests itself, how my affect manifests itself is dependent on my family and my community and my social structure and the education that I have and the food that I eat and the exercise that I do or do not do. So everything is genetic and everything is also environmental. The weighting of those can be different for different traits. But I think it's important to accept that we're born with a certain set of genes and 3 billion base pairs of DNA in each of our cells. And that is dictating where we're starting from. And then we can modify that with regard to our sleep by using electric lights, by drinking coffee, by drinking alcohol, by exercising, etc. So we should be aware that a lot of this stuff is programmed in our DNA and that it's also affected by our environment, how we behave in the real world.
Yeah. And just to build on that, so we talked about environment and lifestyle as well as our genetic inheritance. And people are becoming more aware that they can test their DNA, that they can access some of these insights. Is there 1 or 2 genes or pathways that you think normal people who aren't in the research community can now access and would find those insights useful, as in there's something they can do about it?
Well, there certainly are things that people can do to improve their sleep, but I don't think we're anywhere close to a place where I would recommend people to check their genes. And we're collecting DNA and looking for genes. We have not identified a genetic cause of a majority of our families yet. And with the natural short sleepers, it's a very small minority in which we've got a genetic explanation. So there's much, much more to find. Our hope is that by identifying more and more genes, we'll understand more about what sleep is. It's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle, 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and we have the box, but the box doesn't have a picture on the front. So now we have 4 pieces that are published. We have 3 more pieces that are not published. So 7 pieces out of this puzzle, and we're trying to fit them together, looking for edges and corners and shared colors and so forth. But the more pieces of the puzzle that we can identify through study of families with genetic variants that cause natural short sleep, better I will be able to begin putting those pieces together into a picture. And when we have a better idea of what the picture is, we'll have better understanding of what sleep is.
Right. And so would your guidance then be to focus on the environmental piece at the moment? That's what we have. That's what
that
we
is
can
the thing
change.
That where we have the most control of controlling our sleep and improving our sleep. And it's important to note that we are a chronically sleep-deprived society. It's very much a 24/7 kind of environment that we live in. And so I do agree that we should try to get enough sleep. It's just that what enough sleep is may be different for you than it is for me. There's some people who biologically require 9 or 10 hours of sleep a night. And if they get 7 hours of sleep a night, they will be chronically sleep deprived. And I would predict that increase their risk for many disorders. So the environment is where we can focus things. And there are lots of things that improve our sleep, not eating, just before we go to bed, eating healthy food, exercise. When I exercise regularly, I sleep better. So our lifestyles will help us improve our sleep, improving our lifestyles. A lot of people will meditate or do yoga or other things, mindfulness kind of techniques. You don't want to read or watch a really exciting story or movie and get your mind going a million miles an hour before you go to sleep. You're better off reading something a little boring or just relaxing and thinking about your day to let your brain kind of slow down a little, because when our brain is racing, that gives us difficulty sleeping. Anxiety is a major cause of people having insomnia. And so to the extent that we can minimize those things, particularly around bedtime, the better off we'll be and the better we'll sleep.
And one thing, as you refer to living in a 24/7 culture and a digital age, I understand that blue light from television and cell phones is not helpful. Can you say a little about what you know about that?
Well, blue light is very, very important to our circadian system because the photoreceptors with which we see the world around us are different than the ones where we sense light to adjust our clock. The average person has a circadian day length of more than 24 hours, 24.2 hours approximately. And so we have to shift a little earlier, 0.2 hours earlier every day to live on this planet in harmony with our environment. Mice, on the other hand, have a period that's a little less than 24 hours, and so they have to delay a little each day. And it's the light in the morning and light in the evening that allows us to reset our clock to live on a 24-hour day, even though none of us has a perfect 24-hour circadian clock in our brain. And so blue light is important for doing that. The photoreceptors in our retina, which are not required for vision, but are required for resetting the clock, those respond most to blue wavelength light. And so that is important for our normal sleep regulation and living planet Earth with the changing seasons and 24-hour day length. But when we turn the lights on late at night, when we turn the lights on at 4 in the morning, because we got up with an alarm clock, that's going to have an effect on our circadian clock. And so we have responsibilities that we have to get up for, or we have to stay up late for. That it's not like we can get rid of all those responsibilities, but those do influence our circadian timing. And so people who lie in bed staring at their iPads or their computers or phones are subjecting themselves to light that will change their clock and may get them even more out of phase with the real world tomorrow. And so I think it's really a good idea to leave your phone away from the bed, to leave your tablet away from the bed, to not be doing that kind of stuff every night as some people do, because that will tend to degrade the quality of your sleep and have you be out of synchrony with the day-night light cycle of our planet.
And I wanted to come back to genetics for one gene that's got a lot of attention in the sleep community, and that's the clock gene. Do you think that's more important than others from what you know so far?
No, they're all important. The clock gene is important in the circadian system for circadian timing, but there are a number of genes that are blueprints for proteins, and when these proteins are made in our cell, the way I think of it is that there's a ballet of regulation. There's a choreographed rising and falling of the levels of these different proteins, and sometimes they pair together and turn on gene transcription, and sometimes other proteins will pair together and interfere with the transcription. There's an intricate network of proteins which come from our genes regulating the circadian timing, but also regulating sleep and how much sleep we need. And we're learning more and more about that every day. We know quite a bit about the clock and a lot less about sleep, but it's the kind of genetic studies that we're doing that's helping to elucidate what those pathways and proteins are. And as we learn more and more, we'll be in a better place to say, oh, here's a logical place where we may be able to help someone sleep better by doing this or that, depending on what the gene is, what the biologic pathway is, with medications, with light therapy, with whatever, behavioral therapies.
And so just finally, what is your hopes for the next 5 years? Where do you hope to get to with research in the next 5 or 10 years? Where do you hope we'll get to in terms of the genetics of sleep?
Well, we're always collecting new families, and the more families we have, the more, some families will turn out having mutations in the same gene, but there are going to be many genes, and the more families we have, the higher the likelihood that we can find more genes. And so one hope is that we can get enough pieces of the puzzle so that we can start fitting them together and say, oh yeah, there's a picture is emerging, an understanding of the biology of sleep and what it is and why it's important. And then, of course, we're also pursuing some of the genes and proteins we already have identified, which we think are good targets and may be proteins that could be targeted with small molecules to develop medications that could help people sleep without some of the side effects that some of our sleep drugs have, like addictive potential or memory loss or other things. So understanding the big picture is one main goal. Using the biology to develop better treatments, I think, is the other big goal that I see. It's really exciting.
And if there are families listening who may want to find out more or get involved, what's the best way to find out about your work?
Well, they can just search my name. My name is uncommon enough that I'm pretty easy to find, and send an email. Or Dr. Fu, my colleague, we have a group of people that is collecting families and collecting new individuals. And the first step is to have potential candidates fill out questionnaires that give us a better sense of what their sleep is like. And then if people meet certain criteria, then we go on to a structured interview, go on to collect blood either locally or remotely so that we can study the DNA and look for genes and mutations that might be responsible for this or that person's interesting and extreme sleep phenotype.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and taking us through the genetics of sleep. It's a fascinating topic, and so many of us live in this 24/7 world, and I think the importance of sleep is finally getting its time in the sunshine, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, if I could close with one thing, it would be this. If we can help people to sleep better, we are going to improve human health globally. We're not going to rub out all disease, but better sleep is going to allow everybody to be healthier and happier and to live longer and healthier, longer lives. So I think it's a really important area.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So that's it for this week. Before we go, I do need to make clear, if I haven't already, that I am not a doctor. I'm a health coach, and my lane is lifestyle and how it affects our health. If you have a medical condition or suspect you might be developing one, then a doctor is the right person to see. So that's the legal bit done. In the next episode, we'll be diving into more examples of how our environment and our DNA combine to create our health. So see you right here, same time, same place.